Brindle is no longer popular really in our breed, right? Especially blue brindle. Uh, the what I would call the old school blood, the blood from 10, 15 years ago that was really popular. The bulldog look is a little bit more popular in American bullies now than what the American bully kind of really used to kind of look like, right? We've gotten a little bit further to the right on the bulldog stuff with the flappier jowls, the looser flues, just in the head, right? The rounder head, the rounder eyes, and so on. And I don't like that. American Bully's kind of a blend of the two worlds, a little bit of bulldog and terrier, and I feel like that angulation to the head ought to remain and that kind of thing. So I'm breeding my champion female uh, to a dog that he's a big blue brindle, uh, beautiful dog, 17 inches, 95 pounds. He's a champion in himself. But I and the puppies may not sell fast. They may not sell for a lot of money, but he's a superior animal in his movement, his conformation. There's a reason why I want the blood. I just happen to like the older blood with a little bit of the new. A lot of people like a lot of the new with very little of the old. They've kind of flipped the ratio, but when you get a high concentration of bulldog blood into the breed, you also get a high concentration of the issues that come with the bulldog in terms of health, um, poor genetics. You just have some of those things, right? And so, but I train, I show, I don't mind taking a puppy or two and working them through and taking in them and showing them and earning their champion titles and so on. But a lot of people are afraid to do that. And they also think that, well, if I breed to this dog whose stud fee is $5,000 or $10,000 or whatever it might be, well, then my dog will be too. And they don't really think that the reason why those dogs are that expensive is they're proven producers, and most likely the breeder has developed a program over the years, right? And this is a business, and like any business, I mean, it generally takes 3 to 5 years before anybody really, first of all, knows your name, and 3 to 5 years before you really finally start to develop a product that people are going to pay attention to. Now, some people get lucky and they hit a home run with their first dog. It happens, right? But that's not the norm, right? And so you need to kind of be grounded with, your objective. And like you talked about a little bit before we started recording, was um, about being in it for money or not for money, or and that that tug, if you will, that you have to make it. If you're not independently wealthy, you have to make some money at some point to put back into the program. But you need to be able to fund that program for 3 to 5 years before you start seeing some income, right? And that income only comes if you've made the right choices and picked the right dogs. So there's a huge knowledge requirement there as well. You can't make any money if you don't have the ability to pick the right dogs. So I don't do so getting back to the popular sire syndrome, I don't do the things that the majority of people in our breed do. And so when you talked about breeding a lot to the same studs and getting into that small gene pool because everybody's breeding to those dogs, we have that issue in our breed, um, which 3 years ago was one of the reasons why I started talking about inbreeding coefficients, because I started noticing this trend, right? And I used to breed horses 25 years ago and that's when I got into the inbreeding coefficient stuff. And they did have they did have software back then. It's not as fancy as it is today, but I used to model my horse breedings 25 years ago. And so when I got into bullies, and I was like, I probably better. I started just doing it for my own dogs, and then I started noticing these disturbing trends, and so that's when I kind of started pushing it, or at least trying to start make people aware of it in our breed.
The overall health and the vibrance of the dog, and then the look, what you're looking trying to look for is it might be affected in some way. And so I think that's where the problem is. But what we're what you're really trying to accomplish is a good dog, a good sound animal. And
Right,
you could still push the limits as far as the look is concerned if the other things are in place, in my opinion. um, I think there's a happy medium. Like, there a lot of people that watch my channel know that I interview a lot of people in the working dog world, or your
right.
gamier type dogs,
Yeah,
and
yeah, yeah,
they're all about structure and physical ability, and they'll push the dog to the limit on that level. And if the dog can't handle it, it gets soft, cold, or otherwise out of their
right,
program.
right.
And that's not the companion breed thing, but we do want a dog that's going to be healthy and last long, and be up to its final days, be able to be a part of the family in a way that doesn't cause a strain. Like, sometimes your bulldog, like in my world, the English bulldog world, it takes a lot to own these dogs. and
Yeah, it
and
does.
and so I think the betterment of for the consumer and the pet owner and stuff, we want a healthier dog that is structurally and internally sound. And I think the more that we get away from that, and then we get involved in, like you said, the popular sire syndrome, and the more extreme we get because of that, it just seems like the consumer loses out. Maybe not your top end 10% breeders that are making money and then winning all the titles and stuff.
Yeah,
It's not, it becomes not important to them, and then everybody strives for that. And then really, again, the consumer loses, and the dogs are lose as well, because they're not healthy and they can't function into their older age. I think a dog that's unhealthy may seem healthy, but they hit that 5-6 year mark. That's when their body starts to break down, and we don't want that. And that's what I see in the bulldog world. And I know, just from listening and watching, I see that in the bully world today even more so
yeah,
than maybe
yeah.
10 years ago.
There's not to me. There's nothing more heartbreaking than, first of all, spend $3,000 to $10,000 on a dog for your family. Okay, you got young kids. Kids get attached to the dog and everything. Dog becomes a big part of the family. Okay, I mean, ultimately, that's why most of us own dogs. Is we want a family companion. They're part of our family. Okay, um, and then the dog dies in 3 years. So then you've got the tragedy of a dead dog. Kids are heartbroken. You're heartbroken, right? And all because of you know bad breeding choices, bad selection, bad just things all over. Now things happen, but you know a lot of inbreeding and very tight line breeding, high inbreeding coefficients lead to a greater risk of um, health issues. Okay, so better to make breeding decisions that are balanced, that bring in newer genetic material that provide a better um, genetic health to that animal and more longevity, right? Along with genetic testing, along with OFA testing, hips, hearts, cardiac, that kind of thing. When the dog gets old enough.
And that's the interesting thing when I watch a lot of your interviews and you talk and stuff. What was really, I think, interesting, but again, this is the hard part, especially if you're a breeder and you're in this world, is that you got to be, I'm sure you got to be patient, and you got to do your research, and then you got to be even more patient because maybe your research, you find something that isn't going to mix well with your program. So these are all things that even I'm just as guilty as anybody. I'm an instant gratification person too. I mean, I make stupid decisions on me wanting it now and not really looking at the big picture. And unfortunately, a lot of mistakes comes of that. Just not in the dogs, but anything else in life. But um, what I see is that what really interests me about when I hear you talk is that you're looking for a dog that's going to fulfill every aspect of what you're trying to breed, and you're trying to double down on that look, but you're also not doubling down on high coefficient number. You're looking for the phenotype that you're looking for, and all of that is similar, and you're doing this long drawn out research. You're trying to figure out exactly what's going to fit, and you can do that, but it's not the easy road. It's basically what I'm trying to say is that.
No, it's not. It does require a lot of patience. I have a breeding plan with a particular female right now in place that the ultimate result is not going to happen for 6 years. What I envision, what I'm trying to accomplish, right, with her offspring, with her 3 breedings, okay, that she'll have over her lifetime, and what I'm trying to create by using her as the foundation uh, of our standard line. We have different categories: pocket, standard, XL. So my standard line, she is the foundation of my standard line. Well, the breeding that I'm doing early this next year is followed by another breeding. Um, and then the fruition of that, and the inbreeding coefficient that I want to get to for those particular dogs is 6 years from now, right? So, um, you got so if we're a custodian of a breed of dogs, if we're playing God, right? I mean, for lack of a better way to put it, the dogs don't have a choice. We're making those decisions for them, right? And so you need to have a plan. I mean, not all plans work out, and that's where you need to have, if this is your first option, then you need to have a second and a third, right? Things do happen, but when I start looking at studs for certain dogs, the first thing that I look for is I look for a phenotype that fits, right, that complements my female. Then I look at the genotype, I look at the numbers, I look at that thing, and then I see if that fits. And then if those things fit, then I dig further about, temperament, health, things like that, right? But if those first two things don't fit, then I move on, right? The dog has got to bring what the female lacks, and then the blood's got to line up. I don't want an inbreeding coefficient too high, and I don't want one too low. Now it depends on what you're trying to accomplish, but I'm not. Um, my knowledge may be what a lot of people don't have, but there are a lot of software options out there for people to kennel management software where people can uh, do the same thing that I do in terms of modeling their breedings, right? So that they may not have the science background, but they can still plug in names like a pedigree, and then they can still model the breedings, right? If you don't have a plan and, being the custodian of a breed or, what you want to call it, animal husbandry, whatever it is you want to call it, the animals don't have a choice, and it is our responsibility if you're going to be a responsible breeder to plan ahead and to have discipline. And yeah, you can get excited, and and we all want to go fast. We do, right? Because we want to see the fruits of what we're planning. But and that's why we have a lot of people. They might breed their dog. I mean, we have some people breed a dog on the first heat. So many breed on second. Uh, I won't breed until third heat or 2 years old, and I don't want because it's not just whether the female can have puppies. It's whether the female is mentally and emotionally ready to have puppies. You know what I mean? Now, there's a lot of uh, theory about breed them young and breed them back to back because that eliminates risk of pyometra and things like that. But um, I don't do back to back. I think, I mean, and even though I have a female that just had puppies in May. She had puppies a year ago May. You know, now she bounces back great. 6 months later, I mean, she just finished her heat after her litter. You can't even tell she's had puppies, other than her nipples are a little bit larger, but she sucks up. She's tight. You can't even tell, right? But I won't breed her back to back. I mean, it being a mama takes a lot out of these dogs. They need more than, my opinion, they need a more time to recover, to replenish. To not only that, to be, I think sometimes be emotionally ready again. I mean, this time around, after about 3 weeks, she'd had it. She was like ready to kick these puppies out of here. So, um, but people get in a real big hurry, and I'm 59 years old, and I only started 4 years ago. I'm in a real big hurry. I may not live long enough to see uh, my vision come true, to see if I actually succeeded. But even if I'm not going to do wrong by the dogs.
Right. And how much of this, perspective that you have came from your experiences in the horse world?
Well, with horses, you only get one foal every 340 days, right? And you only get one, not six, eight. You know, so maybe there's something to that, but I'm a big history buff in terms of culture and world history, things like that. And I was kind of what you would call a preservation breeder when I bred horses as well. I always tend to revert to the origins, or as close to the genesis of the breed. You know, um, I guess it's a respect for the people who actually developed the breed and what their vision was, and how I feel like I owe them that respect. Now, breeds change over time. There's no question about that. There's a certain truth to that. You have to breed to the market. It does do you no good to uh, to breed dogs that nobody wants, right? But I always feel like there is a best fit, if you will. There's always going to be people that respect uh, the old the old ways, the older stuff, and then there are going to be people that like the newer stuff. And um, if you have a little bit of both, right? So basically, me, what I'm building in my yard is that My foundation is based on the older blood, but my outcross is the newer stuff, right? So, and then I kind of very, very carefully intermingle those two, right? And also by doing that, I can have people that, for lack of a better way to describe it, have bred themselves into a corner and need an outcross, but that I still have a little bit of that blood that they have in their programs, right? But I have a higher concentration of the old stuff that they will need, right? It just so happens I prefer the old stuff. Now, we have like all breeds, we have a breed standard, and here's where the rub with American bullies comes in. The old stuff can either look like terriers, or you can find those that actually fit the standard, right? And so I'm looking for, and most dogs are head breeds, right? It's the head that really distinguishes the dog from. I mean, they all have bodies, they all have certain angulation, there are variances in height and things like that. But the way we recognize breeds is what they look like in the face, right? And so I'm looking for old blood that reflects the head of our standard, right? So then I can work with the old blood, but still remain within our standard, right? And so that's what I'm trying to do.
Right. Yeah. And that's a balancing act, I'm sure, because
It is.
especially nowadays, what I'm seeing in the bully world, I pay attention a lot, even though I'm not in the inner workings. Um, is that I see that more of the, I guess what you would call the extreme, is the most marketable right now, and
Yeah.
maybe not winning the most ribbons, but it's the most marketable, and it brings in the most income, and so people are striving for that, and when you're trying to keep that happy medium there, I'm sure it's difficult. But I like the idea that, hey, you extreme breeders, if you need a dog to fix your rear angulation or whatever else is going wrong structurally, I'm your man, and you get
Yeah.
to be known for that. I would rather be that person than always trying to chase that extreme and then having to come back and try to fix it. But
Yeah. Well, because eventually, let's just say, 5, 8 years, or maybe even sooner than that, everybody's got the same damn dog, you know, because they're not paying attention. They don't have the discipline. You know, they're not making those. They don't. They're not strong enough in here to follow their own path. Now, there's a lot of people that don't know what the correct path is. They've not been taught. They see they see this guy. They see his program. They see the stud fees on his studs and everything, and they go, well, I'll just do what he's doing. Well, they don't realize the guy's been at it 14 years. He had to. All these guys, almost all these guys that are very, very successful, had to claw their programs out of the dirt just like everybody else. And there's no. We used to talk about it in the horse business. I could take this horse and I could put it in my barn, and that horse might be worth $10,000. I could take it up to the street to this guy that's got a $100,000 barn, white picket fence, $1 million house, and that horse is worth $100,000, right? It's the same horse, right? So I do the same thing with dogs. I don't care about the names. I don't care about any about that. I care about the quality of the animal and how the animal is bred. I'll make the name, right? I'll because the judge in the show ring don't know where that dog came from. I don't have a clue. So, but not everybody has my confidence or my willingness to to walk their own path, right? And so they feel like, well, if I'll just do what this guy's done, then I'll be the same. But that's just not the case, because the thing that they also don't know is that they'll never have that guy's females. They can maybe breed to the same dog. They'll never have his females.
You have money coming in, you could buy your way into this,
Yeah,
and then you could build even a bigger program, because then you've got the financial ability to rely on help and outside, influences, that you don't have to put your blood, sweat, and tears in it for, kind of a mom and pop kennel.
yeah,
And that's where, kind of malice aforethought is kind of the big deal I see, just again from the outside looking in. I try not to speak as an authority on this subject. I just try to speak as a consumer, and then somebody
yeah.
who's studying it. So I don't want to come off that way ever. But that's how I look at it. Is like, you want to build a program, but it there's so many moving parts to that, and you can't do it by just following somebody else's blueprint, because not only are you not that person, you not going to make every decision at every time, and you may not get lucky. I mean, let's say some of these people got lucky, right? Or, you
Sure,
know
it happens.
so you got to put the work in, and you got to study the whole aspect of what you're trying to accomplish, and that's where what you're doing, in my mind, is where it comes to play. You have to play that game to really figure out where you're going to be at the end of the day, not where they are. You know what I mean? It's such a personal thing. Another thing that I find interesting too is that this is a composite breed, and what I really like about composite breeds is you're not really you're not really stuck on, things aren't as rigid, like say in Doberman Pinschers, or
Right.
even English Bulldogs, or things are a little more fluid, and you could have a litter where you have a couple of standards and a couple of pockets, and they all fit that standard. And to me, that's exciting. That's cool. I think the more that you try to, and that's just my opinion, and correct me if I'm wrong, the more you try to hone on just a certain look and a certain type, and you're not looking at the overall arching picture of these dogs that are a new breed. It's a composite breed. They're not. It's just going to be almost impossible to, without making decisions that are going to, in the long run, affect the breed and the program at this point in time. You know what I mean? That, I don't know. So I like that idea. I just don't see the idea of being so rigid and trying to lock in a look by doing it by, not making proper decisions when it comes to line breeding and inbreeding. You know what I mean?
Well, because we American Bully is a relatively new breed that is still truly in development, right? You can breed, pocket to pocket, and out pops a standard. It just happened. Well, I won't say it just happened to me. I think one of the males of the two that I kept is probably going to be a standard, not, and I say standard height, but I don't think he may not have the mass to be a standard. Now I'm hoping he surprises me, but right now he's got classic written all over him, you know, uh, standard height, just not the mass of a standard. Um, but all the others were pockets, so it's still, genetics is a funny thing. It can go back 5, 6 generations and grab something and bring it forward, right? I bred strong pocket dog to strong pocket dog, strong genetics, high COI to uh, moderate COI. Studs should have dominated the breeding, did in most cases, but out pops this. Where did you come from? Right? Still happens because the breed is still in development, right? And you're going to get those surprises. And a lot of times people would breed. regularly still outside their class. There's going to come a point where, based on what ABKC has said, where pockets will only be allowed to be bred to pockets, standards to standards, and so on, right? So you can get more predictability over time that's that group. Because, like poodles, you have toy poodles, you have standard poodles, you have a lot of the AKC breeds, they have standards based on size. And if they've been in development for a long time, where the American Bully is still relatively new in terms of, 3 decades in terms of breeding a dog is not a long time, you know. So we still have surprises.
Well, I had an interesting. I did an interview with a toy man or a Manchester Terrier breeder who breeds toys and standards. And up until recently, I believe in the last decade that they and maybe I don't know the specifics, but I know in at least the last decade they've been allowing them to breed toys to standards
Oh yeah,
because just
genetic diversity.
yeah, there just isn't enough of the population. And so with her, when she does those breedings, she may get a couple toys and maybe get a couple standards. And so but she's she because she's taken two good specimens that fit her type. Maybe she's got a bigger toy and in a average standard, and she's going to work with what that's going to happen. You know what I mean? And she's fluid about her decisions. She's not so rigid, like, oh, I can only do standards and that's all I want, and if I don't, it's a failure or whatever. But no, it's just interesting too, because even in your older breeds and stuff, some of those decisions still have to be made.
Well, they do because the um, the population genetics have gotten too tight, right? And that's why. And yeah, we're new, but so the inbreeding coefficient of your average stray dog is less than 5%. The average inbreeding coefficient of your purebred dog is about 25%. And in the wild, um, survival of the fittest, natural selection, all that stuff. Well, with companion breeds and things like that, all that's taken away. And so then we have to be smart enough to make the right kinds of decisions, which is why these kinds of decisions that I talk about all the time are so important. If we want to maintain the health and longevity of the breed that we purport to love, then we need to make smarter, more educated decisions to preserve that, right? While still accomplishing the same goals, just not everybody breeding the same way and breeding to the same dogs and that kind of thing, and understanding and keeping an eye out on the inbreeding coefficients, right? Um, you can use a lot of the same blood, but you have to keep an eye on. That's why I do private consultations to kind of try to help guide their breeding programs, to give them some insights to some things that they haven't thought about, or to help them understand things. So I do consults, I generate reports so they can really see what the result of that breeding and stuff is. But it's like the Cavalier King Charles Spaniel, the Old English Bulldog, that the popular sire syndrome, and the way that we tend to want to manipulate. Like the French Bulldog used to have a muzzle. I don't even have a hard muzzle anymore, right? We manipulate these things, and for some reason, we have the innate ability to just completely screw up a dog. I don't understand it. Why we do that, right? We can't help ourselves. So the numbers are really predicated based on what you're trying to accomplish. So whenever I do a consult, that's the first thing I ask the person is, what are you trying to accomplish with the breeding, right? Do you have a plan? What you think, you know? And so for me, still being relatively new to the breed, I'm trying to lay I'm trying to lay the foundation, right? And also um my first breeding, my female, her inbreeding coefficient was just a tad below 6, um, with a direct sire line to some of the newer blood. Um, and she kind of resembles the newer blood, only a much cleaner head, tighter skin. Looks nothing like a bulldog, but a little bit rounder head. I took her to, a completely old school dog, right? A grand champion dog, but very, a dog with no crosses to bulldog blood, that kind of thing, known bulldog blood and so on. And so for me, I wanted to infuse a higher percentage of the old blood to start working with. Okay. So got a great litter of 8. Um, the funny thing is when they were puppies and everything, they kind of they definitely looked like little terrier dogs, And man, I'm telling you what, when they 3 females that I kept when they started hitting about 9 to 12 months, completely changed. Head shapes, muzzle, distinct 90 degrees stop, deep furrow. The heads just came in, right? Some of this blood, like a lot, especially terriers, you got to give it time to develop, right? Um, so anyway, they look nothing like they did at puppies. So great little dogs, right? Um, nice little pockets. They range from 14 and a half to 15 and a half inches tall. Just great little pocket sized dogs. Second breeding, I did go to a line of dogs that was to herd direct sire line. So now I will tell you. So what did I have in mind? Well, to be honest with you, this is where I'm building my outcross line, right? And then I'm also, looking to have a couple of stud dogs that will serve that part of the population, right? Sometimes you need to have something to serve part of the population to pay for the things that you want to do, right? So, but I also needed that outcross, and I didn't want to have to guess at what that outcross was going to be, right? So I made my building my own outcross based on that female. Now, so um, I took her to a stud that whose inbreeding coefficient was almost 30%, to her being a little less than 6. The puppies, now granted, coming out, I'm talking about on paper, uh, inbreeding coefficient was just a little bit below 10. Okay. So I felt really nice and balanced. For me, that number is between 10 and 20%, preferably 10 to 14. My upper limit's 20%. That's okay. I So 25 years ago, I happened to talk, and how I got into this was I talked to the director of the equine program at the University of Vermont. Okay. And I happened to breed and show Morgan horses, and that was where the Morgan came from. And you could pick their horses out of a crowd. So consistent in terms of the way they look, so on. So when he said that they like to have their numbers between around 12 to 14%, right? Um, Now science will tell you that it should be no higher than 5. Okay. 10, they call it the extinction vortex in terms of population genetics. That if you have a population that gets up to, cumulative inbreeding coefficient of 10%, you've got nowhere to run, right? So 5% or below. Now, At 5% or below, you're going to have a lot of variance in your phenotype. So, as a breeder, you have to be willing to accept some risk of what a higher number might bring you, but you need to be able to moderate it some, right? And so there's always a trade-off. And when I do things for people, I always tell them inbreeding coefficients are nothing more than an assumption of risk. The higher I go, the more risk I take. The lower I go, the less risk I take, but then the less consistency I'm going to have in phenotype most of the time. Now, I talk a lot about trait-based breeding. If you have two animals that maybe they're completely different bloodlines, but they look almost exactly alike, that means that their genes, right, and those polygenic traits, those modifiers of their overall look are very similar. Okay. So while you may not have the consistency, it's almost like this: if you breed two dogs that look very much alike in terms of height, head shape, length of back, turn to stifle, uh, feet, so on and so on, chances are pretty good you're going to get offspring that are pretty consistent in those areas, even though their bloodlines are different because the polygenic traits are the same. They have the same modifiers, right? So there's a couple of different ways to approach it. But for me, that number is 10 to 20% for my target. So when I say this litter was just below 10, when I had the puppies that I kept embark tested, they were 19 and 20% genetic. So um, the actual genetic inherited by descent, we can't predict that. Only actual DNA analysis can. So when I do analysis on using pedigrees, that number is always going to be lower than the actual genetic result. Uh, I've seen it be as close as 5%, but then again, I've also seen it be as much as double more, right? So if I say on paper no more than 20%, I'm flirting with 40, but I have some things in my software that gives me what they call ancestor loss coefficient, and it's a measurement of um, common ancestors after 5 generations and after 10. So depending on where those numbers are, I can kind of guess um, whether or not that 20 number turns into 40 or more, or whether it's still between 20 and 40. I try to stay on paper. I really do try to stay between 10, 12, maybe even a little bit less, because I know genetically it's going to be higher.
Is we're aiming these dogs because we love the breed and we want to preserve the breed, and part of doing that is living up to the standard, and
Yeah.
so you do have to weigh the risk. And so I when I when I speak, I'm not able to really like lay it down like you do because I don't have the complete knowledge base, and but I'm learning. And but that's it. Is like there is a risk, but there's also a point where you can limit the risk and still make the in lack of a better term the best business decision. You know what I mean? And that and the best decision for the health of your dogs and all of that.
Well, I'll give you an example. I mean, and sometimes it works out in different ways. I mean, my first litter, she had 8 puppies, and I had what I would consider to be one pet quality dog in there. Every other dog was at least breeding or show quality, you know. But again, a lot of it. So whether breeding programs are successful or not has so much to do with the ability of those people to pick the right dogs. There's no substitute for picking the right dog. And that happens when those, if you're not good at picking puppies, right? Or willing to hang on to that litter until they get older and still picking the right dogs, it's going to be hard for your program to be successful moving forward because you keep making the wrong picks. Getting back to that topic about, where inbreeding coefficients and things, Embark did a study, okay? And for every 10% increase in inbreeding coefficient equates to a female having one less puppy per litter. Okay. So the difference of a female at a 10 and at a 40 is three puppies per litter, three litters, nine dogs. Let's say you're getting $3,000 a dog. Okay. So over the lifespan of that female, you've given up $27,000. So as a business person, in just terms of economics, right? So inbreeding coefficients matter. Females with higher inbreeding coefficients have smaller litters. They're more difficult to get pregnant. They just have more issues. I forget what the number was. They did a study on lifespan. There's a direct correlation between higher inbreeding coefficients and shortened lifespan, not to mention dwarfism and other things, right? So there are true genetic detriments to high inbreeding coefficients in dogs, just like there would be people, if we were to do that as a people. So it's it's a serious business, which I try to help. I try to help whoever I can. I used to do it pretty cheaply, but I don't so much anymore. Simply because it could take me hours to do one of these, especially if the dog is not already in my database. I've been entering dogs into this database now for about 2.5 years. I've manually input almost 8,000 dogs just in bullies, right? And so, it takes some time to do the analysis, not to mention the fact that I spend anywhere from a half hour to an hour on the phone with the person going over the reports and then talking about and I give you for instance, you get, if you do an embark test and you get your results back, your genetic results, your inbreeding coefficient of your dog, you get a number, but you can't really see where the concentration of genetics are in the lines of the dog, right? And so one of the things that I do is we look at in the 5 generation pedigree, there's an inbreeding coefficient for every dog in that picture of that pedigree, and we can look at the concentration of the genetics and see the likelihood of which lines will be most dominant. Is there a guarantee? No, there's never a guarantee, not in genetics, because Mother Nature has a weird sense of humor. She does whatever she wants. But so we try to kind of hedge our bets. And so like I said, I spend 30 minutes to an hour with somebody. Matter of fact, that's what I was doing right before I got on with you tonight. Was we spent 45 minutes talking. He's a repeat customer. Spent 45 minutes talking about what I felt about his female and different things. And I even, um, was, just counseling him on this and that, and had a couple of dogs in mind, and I just modeled a couple of them for him on the phone. We talked about it. I did that for free. I do that all the time. If it's something I know and I can just do it while we're sitting there, I don't charge for it. I want them to be successful, right? I want them to make the right decisions. So, but so I spend a lot of time and for what I charge, and especially when you consider the impact of a good or a bad decision, it's money well spent. Yeah, and that's really where it started. Was I was just concerned about the breed, for the longest time I probably didn't, given the amount of time that it takes me, I wasn't charging, near enough, but I wasn't really doing it, you know, I would call as a side hustle for the money. I was trying to help people out, but then I also recognized that um yeah, how much time I was spending doing it, and so I needed to, and plus what you do is you get, if you kind of price things accordingly, then you do weed out some people maybe that might not be quite so serious about it.
What is the reception? I know that there's been some serious people that you've gone onto their podcasts and stuff to talk about this, and they seemed genuinely interested. But I don't know if they totally, have heeded what you were saying or anything. But what is the reception in the bully world with your ability to decipher these things that a lot of people don't think about?
Well, I think it's getting. I think I will tell you this. Um, it's between that and embark testing, okay? And I probably embark tested my first dog 3 years ago, so I was kind of on the leading edge of that as well. But when horses, we had to do DNA parentage testing 25 years ago, right? And they used UC Davis, and then we also, if we want, we thought if we were breeding for a certain, thing, if I wanted to know my horse was homozygous black, we'd have them do other tests, things like that. So I am seeing it in more conversations. I'm seeing it talked about more. Um, I'm not saying that I'm like super, super busy doing it for people, but the people that I tend to do it for do it more than once, if that's an indication, right? So when I first started talking about it, I had what you might call old heads, guys that have been around, right? Matter of fact, I had one guy tell me, he's like, well, that was for horses. These are dogs, they're different. And so it breaking through that dogma, if you will, has proven to be difficult in some instances, right? And the yeah, it can be a challenge, but the more um, the more exposure, um, the more I've been on a few more. And the thing is the different podcasts, er, they have different audiences, they have different reach, right? Uh, Raul Fagundes, a QBN that I did maybe about a month ago or so, he has over 100,000 followers, right? Uh, and then others much smaller platforms. But it's been it's been well received. Now, how many are actually, putting it into practice? And even if it's not with me, I mean, some guys have an innate ability to look at a pedigree and get pretty close to the number, right? I can't do that, never have been able to do that in my memory's so bad from the medication that I take because I've had 10 back surgeries that my short-term memory is, pretty much not much. And so so I rely on the data. I need the numbers. I even keep a binder in my truck of all of my dogs and their information. So when I'm at a show, I can take my binder, right? So when people ask about a dog or they ask about this, or if I've got a breeding that I'm planning on doing that I've modeled, I've got the numbers there because I can't remember. I can't even remember. I couldn't tell you every dog in my dog's first two generations. Now I used to be able to do that with horses, but I can't anymore. So, but it's become, it's getting better when it's a regular topic of conversation when versus when I started roughly 2.5, 3 years ago, nobody talked about it, right? So, so we're making progress, and we had a lady that was on one night, talking about how she's learned more from that podcast and information we shared than she'd ever learned in being involved with the AKC. you know. Um, Now, I don't just and the other thing is too is I don't just listen to bully people. I listen to podcasts about genetics all the time. Okay. If and I tell people, if you can listen to a podcast and you glean one useful piece of information, it was worth your time. That one useful piece of information could change your whole program for you. So you never know where you never now you might listen to some and say, I'm not listening to those guys again. And because they don't, what the hell they're talking about or whatever. Okay, well then, but you do start to hone in on some guys, you know. But I'm listening to stuff all the time. Um, but I don't see there are some guys that breed kind of corsos, um, you know, that talk about it quite a bit. Matter of fact, they had a guy on who was very knowledgeable about how they breed German shepherds in Germany, and how those dogs look nothing like German shepherds from the U.S. Their conformation is different. They're more working dogs, and then you probably maybe maybe don't know, but it's like in Europe and other countries, um, they have a much stricter process of evaluating breeding stock and determining what they have a scoring system, selection process, and determine whether those dogs are allowed to breed or not. Over here in the United States, if you got a dog that's got a couple of nuts, yeah, he can breed. And it's a shame, but it's the difference in culture.
There's an interesting podcast that I'll send you. I don't know if you haven't listened to it, about the Doberman projects and studies, and there was a lot of interesting information that came out of that. I don't want to sit here and quote it, but it talks a lot about genetics and then what the research came to find out, and even like in Europe, where they do have really strict standards, uh, and then if you get into a specific type of club, like a working dog club in Germany or something like that, where they still show those dogs, they're in the show world, but they have to pass certain standards as far as the working trials are concerned. But what was interesting there is that even then, the kinds of things that you talk about are important because they can run into issues, and they've come to find out uh, the least healthy Dobermans right now are coming from Europe, even more,
Yeah.
even less healthier than the dogs here in the United States. And so you're getting a lot of people now that they finally opened up the stud books over there because they were having such a bottleneck of issues. And so they've opened up the stud books to American line Dobermans because of those issues. So it even when you do have high standards like that, you still have to me, you have to be mindful of all of that, and you don't, if you don't have that instant ability to decipher, somebody like yourself is a great service, and just being able to explain it to somebody who maybe not have the science-based mindset.
So the Grand National and World Championships for Morgan horses is held in Oklahoma City, Oklahoma, every October. And being from Oklahoma, and now at the time I was living in Kansas, but we had a horse there, and but I ran into their director at the show and had a conversation with him. But it's not like he mentored me or I was able to get into real in depth or anything like that. He kind of gave me some information, in our conversation, and then I kind of ran with it from there because I was able to do the research. I was able to find the software that I wanted, that I felt fit, and I kind of just went from there, right? So, but you could tell again with what their targets were. I knew, but with what their targets were, their horses all looked the same, right? And so for a breeding program to put a stamp on, if that's what you want, if you want every dog or every horse to look the same, then that's where you want to go. Now I'm a little bit, and I will tell you, I'm a little bit different. Um, I feel like if every dog in your litter looks the same, right? I feel like you limit your customer base because not every customer is looking for the same type of dog. Now they may be looking for a show quality dog. One, you're going to have three types of shoppers: show quality dog, one that's looking maybe for a brood stock dog, and one that just wants a pet. People ask me the price of my dogs all the time. I'm like, well, they range from about $1,000 to $5,000, depending on what you want. Right? If you just want a dog with no breeding rights, no papers, you just want a pet, might be 1,000, $1,500. If you want a brood stock dog with breeding rights, 2,500, $3,500, probably right in that range. But if you want a show quality animal, you're going to pay $4,000 or $5,000 for a show quality animal, right? But in a litter of 10, you might only have two or three of those that would be good enough to show, right? And so they're, but I feel like, I mean, the first litter that I had, and hey, look, maybe I got lucky, but it just happened again, so I don't know. I call it luck. Out of 8 dogs, I had at least 5 that could do well in the show, right? And then 2 were kind of brood stock. One was I would call more of a pet, you know, but and then I've been surprised, and that was how I categorized them as puppies, and even they've even surprised me a little bit, even past that. But so it's it just kind of varies, but and the funny thing is you can have animals, that a stud that has a lower inbreeding coefficient and still be a very consistent producer for a particular part of his phenotype. Now, maybe not everything about him, but maybe he really passes that head on, right? Or maybe he passes on really tight feet, or a really short back, or something like that. And that's because he's homozygous for those particular traits, right? Because when you think about it, right, traits get passed along for, especially with terriers, right, hundreds of years. And so through all those breedings, right, they become homozygous for those particular traits. So even though their inbreeding coefficient may be low, they're dominant for those traits, and they'll pass them along. Um, the progenitor of the Morgan horse breed, um, was they think it was a thoroughbred. Back in colonial times, I think it was a thoroughbred bred to a Welsh Cobb type horse, right? Um, but the reason why he started to breed was no matter what he was bred to, all of his offspring looked remarkably the same, real similar to him, right? And so out of that horse that was complete outcross led to the beginning of an entire breed. So you can have two very genetically dissimilar animals and still have them be a consistent producer. Now they call those genetic sports, right? But it can happen. Not frequent, but it does happen. So that's where I say Mother Nature has a funny sense of humor. We can plan all we want, but at the end of the day, you know, she makes the call.
That's what keeps it interesting too. You're
It
yeah,
does. It
yeah.
does. But we need to be, even if Mother Nature's making the call, right? If we're not tiptoeing into dangerous territory, we're keeping things safer.
Line breeding, inbreeding, and the coefficient numbers are not important to them. How is the different? Do you see a difference between working dogs and companion breeds? As is there a difference at all when it
Well,
comes to this?
I think there are, because in those lines they probably hard go.
They do. I'm sure they do. Yeah. I mean, nobody wants to talk about that, but I agree. And then another thing that people don't want to talk about too is that is another taboo subject that I'm hoping somebody will want to come on and talk to me about. But you know, they're running those dogs hard, so they don't expect them to. A lot
Short
of
life.
times, yeah, a lot of times they don't worry about like what happens when they get old. Unfortunately, I mean, as a companion breed guy, I'm you know. I could never do that, but I understand it, and I respect people who have different mindsets. I don't.
Well, they viewed the dog as a tool, and in their world, that dog is a tool. It's not a companion animal. It's a purpose built tool, right? And so I get it too. Um, but yeah, that's the thing. They well, and we'll even have, I believe, uh, breeders in the bully world, right? Where, look, they line breed or inbreed pretty tight, okay? But you never hear about their mistakes. You never hear about the calls. You will only, and look, I get it, but you'll only ever see the best of the best. You won't know how big the litter sizes are. You'll just, they'll just, you know, present these two or whatever. Okay, well, how big was the litter? Well, what happened? No, they're not going to talk about that, right? They'll be pet homed or cold or whatever, right? So, well, I have my female that's had the two litters now. Again, her inbreeding coefficient's less than 6, just under 6. She had a first litter of 8. Her second litter was 7. She's 13 inches tall and weighs 55 pounds. Okay, she's not a big dog, muscly, but she's not a big dog. Um, Embark genetic test clear, right? Good healthy dog. 8, like I say, 8 and 7. Every pup has lived. Not had problems with any of the pups. Honestly, I've had some pretty good consistency uh, with the offspring. Some really good quality dogs. Does she have some flaws? Yes, she does. She's a little straight in the stifle. Have some of her offspring had that? Yeah, to varying degrees. There's been some, every breeding that I have done with her. Um, I've tried to improve that turn to stifle. You know, um, she became a champion before she was even a year old. So she's a really nice dog, but every dog has flaws, right? And that just happens to be hers. She has a nice rear. She just didn't have the best angulation. So constantly trying to improve that, right? And then every breeding, even if daughters of the 3 daughters of hers that I have, 2 have him better angulation, and 1 has about what her angulation is, but still brings even more to the table than what her mom did. So her first breeding, we're still trying to bring more angulation, right? So it's an evolutionary process. Um, don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. Every dog has a flaw. Always be trying to improve it, right? So, and then retain the best and pet home the rest, kind of thing, right? So she's been a good producer. She's had large litters. Every dog's been healthy. I don't have, I don't have to hide any dogs. And then you know, I know what I was going to say. There was a guy that came to me, and maybe about a year ago, and wanted to know what I thought about this. And I think the inbreeding coefficient of the puppies on paper was like 66%. I mean, it was really up there, right? He didn't want to pay for it, right? I kind of glanced at the pedigrees and I'm like, that looks awful high. I don't know that I would, but he didn't want to go through and get the exact information. Well, I was so curious, I couldn't help myself, right? So I went ahead, did the analysis. It came out to like 66% or whatever. And I even got back with him and I just told him the raw number. I didn't go over everything. I just said, this is what it is. Well, he did the breeding, had 9 pups and only 6 survived. Now, did that high inbreeding coefficient have something to do with it? You know, um, don't know, but it probably didn't help, right?
Right. And when you're breeding, you want to limit that. I mean, I guess if that's not your main goal to see your dogs survive and thrive, and you're just doing it to get what you can, that doesn't matter to me. But for me, it would, and when I do business with a breeder, it's important that they have that similar type of mindset. So
Well, and that kind of comes full circle to that question I asked everybody. What's your objective, right? So if I do a breeding and I want a stud that's going to be a very strong producer, at least by the numbers, right? Then I want a high inbreeding coefficient, right? So maybe I do the breeding and I'm okay with whatever falls out. You know what I'm saying? I just want the one dog, right? Now, the bad part about that is what if you have a litter of 6 and they're all females? Now what, I mean, it's so again, I feel like it's always better to walk that fine balance. You can have a consistent producer with a dog that's got an inbreeding coefficient between 10 and 20%. I mean, so I don't see I don't see the value in the enhanced risk, to the breed going just going higher. I don't see it, on a there are always exceptions here and there. And I tell people like, look, if you're going to do a high COI breeding for a particular reason, then the best counsel that I can give you then is to make sure that both dogs have been genetically tested and that they, at least if they're not both clear, they don't both carry more than one copy of the same gene, right? So at least then you minimize some risk, right?
right, yeah, that is very important. Um, Talk about health testing. What does that mean to your program? You talked about OFA and everything. Like, what has been your experiences with that process?
Well, the OFA and stuff is pretty simple. I mean, you just go to your vet, right? You have the X-rays done, send the forms in, type thing. The hardest part is uh, the advanced cardiac, which has to be done by a canine cardiologist, and there's not one in the state of Oklahoma. You have to go to Dallas. But embark testing, the genetic testing is very simple. You get a little kit, you do a cheek swab, put it in the tube, shake it up, send it in. 3 to 4 weeks, you get your results, and to me, that's look, they're both important in a lot of in their own ways, right? For and for bully breeds, and even if I didn't do anything else, I would want to do the hearts and the genetic panels, right? Now, as we know, puppies can have low grade murmurs when they're young, and then they grow out of it, right? So you kind of have to wait on that as well. You can do preliminary hips as early as 16 months, but you know everything doesn't come together until they're 2, so you kind of got to wait on that. Um, but um, I think if you want, and the crazy thing though about our breed is, and that's the problem too, is that most people don't care about it. I've never had anybody ask me. Now, do I advertise it? Yeah, it's on my it's on my business cards. It's on my truck. It's that we genetically we test our dogs and health test and so on. But never had anybody ask me. Now, when I'm looking for a stud, you can bet I ask, right? And then I get a lot of what's that? And so I ran into it a couple weeks ago. There was a guy that had a dog that I liked him. I was interested in him. He was a combination of this newer blood that I've got in my yard, but a lot of the old blood that I have in my yard. So he's kind of a balance. He'd be a great line breed to kind of fit in, right? For crazy enough, and I'll tell you how far I think out. I was looking at him for the 4-month-old female I have, right? So, but I was like, is he health tested? Has he been embark tested or wisdom panel or whatever variant of genetic test? He didn't know what that was. He was an older guy, retired. I think he just bought the dog. Somebody. Uh, and again, nice dog. So I kind of took him through the process, educated him, so on. I said, look, I really like to put a deposit down on your dog for a future breeding. We call it lock-in. So if you put a deposit down on a dog at a certain stud fee, no matter how much that dog's stud fee goes up, you always get it at that rate, right? And so I said, but I won't do it until he's been at least genetically tested, right? And so we'll see if he actually gets it done. But there's just a lot of people that still don't know about it. But I won't. Now, I will say that I did kind of violated my own rules in some way, but this outcross I was telling you about, these puppies, grandsire stud fee was $25,000. Um, I put the deposit down on the stud, a son of that stud, 2 years ago, and just got to use the stud credit. But so this guy's probably the biggest name breeder in our breed, right? But he'll flat tell you he doesn't health test. So I knew my female was clear, and it was one of those risks that I was willing to take. And so then I did embark test the puppies, and everything's fine, thank goodness. But and their subsequent vet exams, no heart murmurs, no, that, because those particular lines have been known to have some heart murmurs, some hip issues, and of course now we're not to the point of the hip issues yet, um, but we got past the genetic part, right? So we're good there. But I won't ever do that again. That was the one time I was willing to do it. You know what I mean? Well, here's what I don't get. You have people that they charge 5, 10, $20,000 stud fee, and you won't spend $150 to genetically health test your dog. Maybe they don't want to know the answer. I don't know, but
That's it. I'm sure that they probably do, and they don't a lot of times, and they don't want to know anymore.
they do and they don't say they do. It's irresponsible to me. From a breed standpoint, it's irresponsible, right? Um,
what do they do with the knowledge that they get from these results? And you talk to a real canine geneticist, and they'll tell you that health testing is not necessarily health testing. They consider it disorder testing, and it just gives you an ability to make a better decision. And it's not black and white, and you shouldn't call these dogs out of the genetic pool, because then again you're doing what you were talking about trying to avoid in a lot of ways. And so there's a lot of good animals in this particular group of French bulldog breeders that are not being bred because they don't know how to um, analyze the science. They just see numbers and words, and they take it as gospel. And so I that's a on the other side of the spectrum that I've started to see now in some of the bulldog world.
Yeah, well, that, I mean, that being a myopic view is like, how do you improve the overall genetic health of a breed population? And that is through the infusion of superior genetics into the gene pool. So if you take these that have been tested, and you breed them to other dogs that maybe they're not, or maybe they have less than desirable hips, but maybe they're okay. Well, by getting even better hips, you bring the underperforming, you bring it up, so you increase the quality of the overall population. But those people want to hoard their genetics, right? And then they do that, but then the rest of the population suffers, and then they have nowhere to breed after a while, and then they're stuck.
Well, at least they got $10,000 for that
Hey, there
fridge
you go.
full. Yeah, yeah.
But it's that very narrow, that very myopic view, and truly, in a broader sense, a full appreciation of the big picture, right? Um, from a population genetic standpoint. Um, uh, there's a good website. I believe it's the Institute of Canine Biology, uh, that delves into a lot of the population genetics, and they offer workshops and things like that. That's really good, because you know we do have to factor in our own dogs, but at the same time we have to try to keep an eye out for our our population that we're in, right? Whether it be French bulldogs, American bullies, that's our population, right? And you know, uh, and try to elevate everyone, But and I tell everybody, look, at a minimum, you should understand, your COI and do genetic testing, um, because and I use this as an example a lot. If you have a dog that has two copies of canine ataxia, which is a neurological disorder, then you have a dog that's dead by the time it's 5, right? Now, if you have a dog with one copy, you can decide to either breed or not breed that dog, or whatever you want to do. But if you do decide to breed it, let's say it brings a lot of great traits from a breed standpoint. By understanding that information, you would then only breed that dog to dogs that are completely clear of that disorder, right? And then you would test that offspring. And then, if you choose to do so, then the goal would be to, depending on the quality of the puppies, you weed out those that carry any copies, and you maintain and you keep those dogs that are completely clear in your breeding program. And then that's how you eliminate a very deadly trait in one generation, right? But if you don't have that knowledge from a science standpoint, then you have no way to know to do that, right? And so then you could unwittingly sell people dogs that are dead by the time they're 5.
I was talking to somebody who had been in the bully world, and then they decided they were going to take a different avenue, and they said that they're happy that they did because of some of the things that they're seeing in the bully world, that dogs are dying young, and the more
Yeah,
extreme that
yeah.
it's getting, the more evident it is. But there's just so much emphasis on these dogs that nothing's going to change right away until more people are. And it was interesting because uh, as somebody who's paid attention with the American Bully for at least 10 years now, 10, 12 years since I've been really paying attention to dogs and stuff, is a deeper knowledge of dogs instead of just the precursor stuff that I really like a lot of the bullies that I see out there today, um, but I also see that some of them are now becoming more and more extreme, and then that seems to be more of the end thing now. And I saw
It
it
is.
I saw it in the bulldog world, and then you've seen it in the French bulldog world, and now you're just starting to see the benefits, the negative benefits of that. So, what is your overarching thought about the state of the American bully today, as far as what you see is popular and what is winning in the ring, compared to what you are trying to accomplish in the ring and in the breeding?
Well, we really do have kind of a. So in order to understand the American Bully, you have to understand where the American Bully sprung from, right? The culture, right? Uh, a hip hop culture, an urban culture, you know, um, which typically has a little bit more of an emphasis on what's hot, what's new, you know, always looking for the next big thing, um, rapidly changing, kind of environment. Um, and so um, you kind of have two factions now, I guess one way to put it. People who are continually trying to push extreme dogs in terms of, the size of the frame and then the weight that they carry. I'm gonna put it to you this way: there's a reason why most professional bodybuilders, don't live past the age of 45. Organs give out, right? Skeletal structure, the body, the uh, metabolic functions and stuff just can't support that much mass, right? Um, and so now in the show ring, um, still a little bit more about proportions, balance, but we are seeing some leakage into the show ring of the extreme. Um, and I was talking about that earlier about a bulldog head, changes in the looks. What was the standard? What classified as a standard 5 years ago is now a classic. Most standards, now are 95 to 105 pounds. Where you know, um, that's a big dog on a 17 to 19-inch frame. You know, um, so I mean, I have a 17-inch male. He's not quite 2 years old yet, and he runs 85. He runs 85 pounds. Now, And when it comes to weight, you can have a dog that's longer, right? That's going to weigh more, you know. Um, my guy is weighs 85 pounds, but he's extremely compact, right? And so his 85 pounds, kind of like my little female that had the puppies. She's 13 inches tall, but she's very compact and weighs 55 pounds. She's like picking up a cinder block. Well, you can have a dog that weighs 100 pounds, but he's a longer dog, is different from having a dog that's very compact and still weighs 100 pounds, right? So there's a little bit of a difference there, but I mean, I can't imagine. I mean, at 17 inches and 85 pounds with a almost 26-inch head, that's a he's a he's a he's a big little dog. You know what I mean? I can't, you know, I can't just pick him up. I'm a good sized guy, but I can't just pick him up from the floor and put him in my lap anymore. Uh, he's rough to get into the tub to give him a bath and things like that. I can't imagine trying to do. Now, I'll give you, for instance, the Cane Corso that we have. He's already 24 inches tall at the wither, weighs 105, 110 pounds. I can pick him up a lot easier than I can pick up my bully. So, but I think that the show world is still kind of holding its own in a lot of ways. But when you have the registry owner always saying, to push the line of extreme without going over, without the dog falling apart, right? That fine line, right? But um, I honestly think now, not every dog, but I think we're at that fine line. We have a lot of dogs that are falling apart. We have a lot of dogs that are dying young. We have a lot of dogs that, I just personally, I don't understand it. I had a dog. I had a dog here that I co-owned. So he was 2 years old, 16 inches tall, 65 pounds. Very, very, in terms of bully, head shape, structure, really nice little dog, right? I had no place to show him. He's technically a pocket by height, but didn't carry enough mass to compete in the pocket world anymore. So now, when he was a puppy, he was the biggest male of the litter, right? And his dad was, he could compete in the pocket world, right? But he just didn't turn out like his dad. And, but I mean, as nice of a dog as he was, I had no place to show him. I might could have showed him in another other registry, but not in ABKC, right? And so he went back to his other co-owners. They bought me out and they took him back, right? But I I see nothing wrong with uh, a 60, 65 pound pocket dog. We think about it. I'm 59 years old. Okay. Um, when you get 55, 65 years old, and even older, a lot of people that are older and by themselves want a dog as a companion and that kind of thing, right? Well, most of them are going to choose a bully because they're too damn heavy to move around, you know. Um, so I don't know. I guess their choices are Frenchies and Boston Terriers or something.
And then they find out those little bastards' temperaments, and then they're like, "What the hell did I do?"
Yeah, yeah. Because I had Boston Terriers. Yeah,
Yeah,
and loved them,
I
but
love them. Yeah,
they're high energy. They're
tough little
um,
bastards. Yeah,
yeah. What I like about a bully is if you got a healthy one that's you can go out and you can play. and they can be as active as you want to be. But if you want to just chill in the house on the couch all day, they're happy to do that too. And I love that about them.
Yeah, me too. I mean, that's why I'm just such a big, big lover of all the bull breeds that are more
Yeah,
companion style, for
yeah.
sure. Because I'm a pet guy, first and foremost.
While I'm knowledgeable, I'm not that far along in my program. So even only been in 4 years, my fourth year, I had some setbacks early on where when my first female I bred, and I didn't know this at the time when I selected her, right? But her genetic inbreeding coefficient was 38%. And she reabsorbed her first litter and got biometra, and I had to spay her, right? So I lost, and I don't have four of the first dogs that I started with anymore. So it kind of hurt me a little bit, but um, I pet homed her, sold the others at a loss, as pets, and kind of had to start over, right? So now we're, you know, and then of course it's at least still with bullies, you almost have to buy puppies, right? So then you go through them growing up, and then I show my dogs, so I've champed them out. I got one female that one I'm breeding early next year. She's 2 wins shy of grand champion. Um, and then my male that I was talking about, he just lacks one major from becoming a champion, and all these are dogs that I bought as puppies. So you put that time, you put that work into them and everything, and you wait and you watch for them to grow and stuff, and then it's finally you get to the point where it's breeding time, and then you can start to put, so my first productions are just now 16 months old. So of course the very first litter, not nobody knowing me, right? Um, it's not like people just running to me to buy my dogs, even though they were sired by grand champion out of my champion female. Um, but it wasn't the blood that was hot at the time, right? So they look like more like terriers as puppies. They do not look like terriers now, but so many people lack the patience to wait on the blood to mature, right? They want the biggest puppy, right? The bulliest puppy. Well, I can tell you, I picked one of those, and he turned out to be 16 inches and 65 pounds. The biggest puppy doesn't mean that um, that it's going to end up being the biggest, bulliest dog. It just means it might have been um, the most mature egg that got fertilized first, right? And so that's the biggest puppy. Well, the runt is only the egg that got fertilized last. That's what a runt is. How many runts have you seen or heard that end up being the best dog in the litter? You know, so you have, I guess, patience is such an important part if you're going to be a dog breeder. You know, and even if you're, you know, if you're someone that wants to, if you're someone that wants to buy a dog for a specific person, let's say you want to become a breeder, then talking to a breeder that has an idea how that blood's going to mature and what it's going to turn into, right? And telling you you need to be patient because the heavier bulldog blood dogs mature faster, okay, but then they fall apart faster. It's just exactly the opposite with the other blood, right? So there's that good in between with that little bit of mixture of both. Um, that has a good lifespan, 10 to 14 years versus 7 or 8, and uh, that's kind of where that's kind of where I want to live, you know, my program for my product. But, there's a lot of people that are calling a lot of the extreme dogs, what they call tool dogs. You take an extreme dog and you breed it to a classic, something maybe structurally correct, but less mass. And then the idea is to get a, blend of the two. And look, there, there is a role for a tool dog, you know, but I think, like you asked before, there's always going to be people that keep striving for the most extreme, the most massive. Uh, but I just still feel like a dog should be functional, even if they're just a companion dog. You should be able to take them out for a walk. You should be able to do at least some light exercise and play and things like that, baby. You know, I mean, dogs still need to be able to be dogs.
Yeah, for sure. I agree. And so when I hear things like uh, them say that movement is not part of the deciding factor in the show ring, that it's the type, I start to say, well, that's a big disconnect. That for me, I wouldn't want to walk that line. I'd rather have the dog that moves a little better. It may not be the popular look, because I feel like movement in a lot of ways is a sign of being healthier.
Yeah. Now, I mean, understand that so your pocket dogs, right, are not going to move like a standard dog or an XL, but they should still have good movement for their class, right? There's some of these dogs that they just don't have good movement for their class, but as long as they look the part, right, it's become more about that. And I feel like in a dog show that, I mean, ultimately a dog show was for confirmation to evaluate breeding stock, right? Not a fashion contest, or kind of thing. And I think we're doing breeders and the dogs a disservice because in a lot of ways breeds and people who breed dogs are kind of monkey see monkey do. If the judge says, I mean, if the judges consistently put ribbons on these dogs that don't move well or that they're a lot of other things, right? For confirmation of bad movement, but they look bully as hell, for lack of a better way to put it, right? People are going to disregard movement and confirmation and just go after a bully dog, right? A dog with a lot of mass and a big head. Okay, that's to me that's just part of the equation. If you got a show dog, it should be a well balanced overall dog, right? Now, may still have some flaws. Obviously, will still have some flaws, but at the end of the day, we're looking for minor varying degrees of those flaws, not gross representations of those flaws.
You see it in the English bulldog world. Like every dog has a real stiff stifle. Like why can't they have better rear angulation? They can. They absolutely can. Yeah, they're not going to run like a Staffy bull, but if they ran a little bit like a one, they'd be way better off. and
Yeah, when
you'd still have the bulldog look. They may not have the exact wrinkles in the right spots or whatever. They might be a little more muscled up, like a lean defensive end instead of a nose tackle or whatever. So, but you'd
and then
still
people
have,
wonder why we have problems with stiff stifles with American bullies.
yeah,
But that's why, you got it from the bulldogs.
yeah, for sure. Yep.
But yeah, that's how they describe it. Pockets are your linemen and your standards are your defense ends or
Yeah.
and your
Yeah.
classes are more wide receivers, right? That buddy of mine, he's actually the sire of my female that's almost a grand champion, and one of the winningest dogs. He's a grand champion in ABKC and a champion in 5 other registries, right? And so when he started, he was a standard and at 18 inches, and I think he's about 90 pounds. He's now a classic. I'm like, you kidding me? Go figure. I mean, he's a great dog. I mean, I'd take a whole yard full of it. But his classics are some of the prettiest, well moving, conformationally correct dogs we have in our breed. There were a handful of dogs, right,
Mm-hmm.
that were at that upper end of the standard, right? They had the mass, they had the weight, they had the head, right? And they said, okay, these are now the standards. This is what we want, right?
Right.
And so then they basically just obsoleted thousands of standards into the classic class, right? And now there's so few true standard dogs, you know. And so now it's kind of really been going on for the last 3 years is we call it everybody's in the lab trying to play catch up. That
Yeah.
wants to that wants to breed a standard dog. And I mean, and I'm no different. My um, one champion female, she's a classic.
Mm-hmm.
You know, she's 17 and a half inches and 80 pounds, female, right?
Mm-hmm.
Good dog, but she's a classic. I mean, I'm breeding her to 17 and a half inch, 95-pound dog. Now, even he teeters on is he standard or classic, right? At 95 pounds.
Mm-hmm.
But he's a phenomenal structured, well moving dog with a 26-inch head. So if I end up in classic, so be it. I'll have classics. I may never be able to produce a true standard dog with my taste in dogs. I might not,
Yeah.
I'm shooting for it, but because I want a dog that'll win nationals. Well, and I'm super competitive, but I won't compromise the dog just to win. Just won't do it. So, but then there lies the competition of breeding the right dog the right way. But that's the competition with me and myself, right? I've told people this, so we'll keep one thing in mind. Chances of that judge buying any of your dogs is pretty slim. So when I go into the show ring, I'm showing for the people on the rail because they're the ones that come up to the booth after the class or after the show and visit, not the judge, you know. And yeah, so that means if you want to look at, you know, uh, where you're where your dogs go, where you make your money is the people in the crowd. It's not the judge.
Yeah, and that's exactly why you're going to these shows, and the icing on the cake is winning. You know what I
That
mean?
right.
But for
Now,
pure business in the vibrance of your kennel.
yeah, yeah, absolutely. I mean, in ABKC, you don't get any points you only get points for first place, right? And but you go to a show and it's a large class and you pull a ribbon in a large class, you know, 10, 15 dogs. That's still a good thing now. You may not get any points, and that sucks. But still, go home with a ribbon is something to be proud of. So
Would you ever show in the UKC?
I would, but there's never any close around. It's mostly a East Coast, southeast part of the country kind of deal. Um, right now, I'm kind of limited to about an 8-hour drive. Well, I appreciate you saying this, and I appreciate you inviting me on and
Yeah.
exposing me to a new group of people.
Thank you. All right. Talk to
Yeah.
you. Talk to you soon. Hold on just one sec.
Jesus Answers Prayers is a multi-platform ministry in both English and Spanish. Our mission is twofold. First is evangelism. We have the gospel presentation videos to help reach the lost and explain the basics of the gospel. The links can be found at the end of every video produced by this ministry. They also help in aiding the Christian in evangelism. Second is the education for the Christian community. God's word is very important to know. God doesn't speak in an audible voice to us, but he does speak through his word. If we don't read his word, then we can miss out. So knowing is important. And if you're anything like me, it can be hard to understand particular chapters and their meanings. So it's nice to have that commentary to help grow in the understanding of God's word. If you want to grow in your understanding of Scripture, then you can find the Bible, a work in progress, book by book, chapter by chapter, with a corresponding Matthew Henry commentary. God bless and see you there.
Jesús responde. Oraciones. Es un ministerio multiplataforma, tanto en inglés como en español. Nuestra misión es doble. La primera es la evangelización. Tenemos los videos de presentación del Evangelio para ayudar a alcanzar a los perdidos y explicar los conceptos básicos del Evangelio. Los enlaces se pueden encontrar al final de cada video producido por este ministerio. También ayudan al cristiano en la evangelización. En segundo lugar, está la educación para la comunidad cristiana. Es muy importante conocer la palabra de Dios. Dios no nos habla en voz audible, pero sí a través de su palabra. Si no leemos su palabra, entonces podemos perdernos. Entonces, saber es importante y, si eres como yo, puede resultar difícil comprender capítulos concretos y sus significados. Por eso es bueno tener ese comentario para ayudar a crecer en la comprensión de la palabra de Dios. Si desea aumentar su comprensión de las Escrituras, puede encontrar la Biblia, un trabajo en progreso, libro por libro, capítulo por capítulo, con el correspondiente comentario de Matthew Henry. Dios los bendiga y nos vemos allí.